years after a mysterious something landed in the Arizona desert, the Air Force has issued a 231-page report on what's become known as the incident at Roswell.
A silent flash split the Kansas sky, followed by a shockwave strong enough to shake farmhouse walls. What struck the ground was not a meteor and not an aircraft. It was intact, cold, and engineered.
There was some kind of a crash out on the highway. Bodies were retrieved and taken to a military base in northern New Mexico.
Within days, scientists realized it had not fallen by accident. It had slowed itself. It had scanned the air. And it had reacted to life itself.
World was told, nope, just a weather balloon, until witnesses started to surface, saying, no, it was actually an extraterrestrial craft. And people saw alien bodies.
What began as a rural mystery became a discovery that forced NASA to confront a terrifying possibility. The night the sky broke open. It was a cold November evening in rural Kansas. The air was clear. Thomas Riley had finished most of his work for the day and was checking one last irrigation line before heading back to his small farmhouse. He looked up for a moment to check the clouds, and that was when the unthinkable happened.
A large black craft coming right towards us, and I told my wife at that time, I said, that son of a bitch is a mile long.
A white streak ripped across the sky. It was so bright that it turned the fields around him the color of burning magnesium. For a second, he could see every fence post and every stalk of wheat in sharp detail. His eyes watered. His brain tried to explain it in simple terms. Meteor, shooting star, maybe space junk. All of those things sometimes happen when objects from space enter the air at high speed and push the air in front of them. The compressed air gets very hot and glows, which is why we see bright trails. But something was wrong. When normal objects fall from space, the light fades fast, and the object either burns up or hits the ground with brutal force. Here, the light did not fade in the right way. The streak slowed. Thomas could actually see the glow crawl instead of crash. It was like watching a plane come in for a careful landing instead of a rock falling. There was a long, sick pause. For several seconds, there was no sound at all. The night felt held in a tight grip. Then the shock reached him. A brutal boom slammed the air, rolled over the fields, and hit him in the chest. His ears rang. The ground shook. Windows in the house behind him rattled in their frames. Cattle in the far pasture screamed and bolted in a blind run. He smelled dust and something like hot metal, but there was no fire in the sky, no flames, no smoke column, just a strange, wrong silence after the blast. Thomas was not a scientist, but he knew the land. He knew where the sound had come from. His fear was very simple. Something big had hit his property, and it did not behave like anything he had seen in 60 years of storms, plains, and distant thunderstorms. His hand shook as he moved toward the source of the impact. The closer he came, the stranger the world seemed. Birds that usually perched in the hedgerows were gone. Even his dog, which usually followed him everywhere, stopped halfway and refused to come closer with its ears flat and its body low to the ground. The crater was not what he expected. It was wide, but not as deep as it should have been for something that had come from the sky with that much force. The soil was pressed down in neat rings, like ripples frozen in dirt. It looked less like an explosion and more like something had pushed the ground down in a controlled way to soften its own landing. In the center sat the object. It was bigger than any cargo plane he had ever seen at the nearby airfield. Its surface was a dead metal gray in some places and a hard glare in others, as if parts of it were swallowing light while other parts spat it back. There were no wings, no tail, no obvious engines. He reached his hand out and then pulled it back, frightened of what he was about to touch. When he finally placed his fingers on the surface, he felt nothing. No heat at all. That made no sense. Anything that had just ripped through the atmosphere at high speed should have been blazing hot for a long time. Later, scientists would compare what happened that night to real events in history. In Russia, in the year 2013, a meteor exploded over the city of Chelyabinsk. The shockwave broke thousands of windows and injured many people, but the rock itself broke apart in the air.
Followed by an almost apocalyptic scene, a blinding flash of light, and then all hell broke loose.
In 1908, an event over Tunguska flattened a huge area of forest. Again, there was destruction, but no solid craft left behind. In both of those cases, the objects either vaporized or shattered. On Thomas Riley's farm, the object had survived. It was almost whole. It sat in the center of a shallow crater. His first instinct was simple fear. His second was duty. He backed away, pulled out his phone, and called for help. First, contact with the impossible. By sunrise the next morning, the field no longer belonged to Thomas Riley. State troopers stood at the fence line. Trucks blocked the dirt road. Men with radios spoke in low voices. Thomas felt pushed to the edge of his own land, confused and shaken, watching strangers circle the object like it might wake up at any moment. Late that morning, Dr. Samuel Hart arrived. Hart was not the kind of scientist people expect in stories like this. He did not believe in flying saucers. He had spent his career studying falling space junk, burned-up satellites, and rare meteor paths.
How fast it's forming stars. We can measure the amount of stars in the galaxy. We know the size because we know how far away it is.
He had helped NASA track objects that could hit Earth. His job was usually to calm people down, not scare them. When he stepped out of his car, he expected to see a broken aircraft or some classified hardware that fell off course. The moment he saw the object, his expression changed. Hart walked slowly around it, careful with every step. He did not touch it at first. He watched how light behaved on its surface. Parts of the metal looked dull and flat. Other sections reflected light sharply, almost painfully. This mattered because normal aircraft metals behave in predictable ways. This surface did not. It acted like it was designed to control light instead of simply reflect it. He explained it simply to the officers nearby. Some materials can be engineered to bend waves like light or radar. These are called metamaterials. Humans are only beginning to experiment with them in small lab projects for stealth technology. This object looked like it used something far more advanced, spread across its entire body. Then there was the sound. The object gave off a deep hum that could be felt more than heard. When Hart moved closer, the tone shifted slightly. When he stepped back, it changed again. That suggested interaction with the environment. Machines that are powered down do not do that. Something inside was active, responding to movement, air pressure, or electromagnetic fields. Hart finally placed his gloved hand on the surface. He expected warmth. Anything that entered the atmosphere at high speed should stay hot for hours. That fact disturbed him more than the size. A material scientist arrived with a handheld spectrometer. Hart explained what it did in simple terms. The device shines light on metal and reads how the metal responds. From that, scientists can tell what elements are present. The readings did not match any known aircraft, satellite, or rocket alloy. An alloy is just a mixture of metals. Engineers mix metals to make them lighter, stronger, or more heat-resistant. Every modern aircraft uses carefully tested alloys.
When they look at it, they seem to be exactly like the kind of tiny nanoparticles and machine bits that we are creating today.
This object used a mix no one had seen before, with trace elements appearing in ratios that should not exist in normal manufacturing. Hart stood quietly for a long time after that. This was not debris. It was not a failed launch. It was not a weapon that missed a target. Its shape did not favor speed or lift. It favored control, stability, and survival. Hart contacted his colleagues that afternoon. By nightfall, data files and images were moving through secure channels. Requests for samples came fast. When Hart returned to his hotel, his phone buzzed again. The message was short. NASA needed to speak with him immediately. NASA steps in. Classified science and silent panic. NASA became involved before the sun set on the second day. This was not unusual once the details were clear. NASA has a real job called planetary defense. Their teams track asteroids, falling satellites, and space debris that could threaten Earth. Most alerts turn out to be harmless. This one did not. Within hours, the decision was made to move the object.
Of the craft, and that's when I noticed that there was, inscription on the side. It is about 3 feet long, maybe 6 inches high.
The Kansas field was not equipped for what came next. Under heavy guard, the object was transported to a secure research facility linked to federal and NASA programs. The location was not disclosed publicly. Security was strict. Armed personnel controlled every entrance. Phones were taken. Cameras were sealed away. Only approved scientists, including Dr. Hart, were allowed near it. The first tests focused on the metal itself. Scientists began with isotopic analysis. Hart explained this process in plain terms to junior staff. Atoms of the same element can have slightly different weights. These versions are called isotopes. Different stars and planets produce different isotope patterns. These patterns act like fingerprints that tell scientists where matter came from. The results caused silence in the lab. The isotope ratios in the metal did not match Earth. They did not match known manufacturing processes. Some ratios closely resembled pre-solar grains. These are tiny particles found in rare meteorites that formed before our Sun existed. They are older than the solar system itself. Finding traces of such material inside a solid engineered object was deeply unsettling. It suggested the raw matter used to build it came from far beyond Earth. Next came radar and atmospheric data. NASA pulled records from satellites, weather stations, and military tracking systems. The object had entered the atmosphere at near orbital speed. That is fast enough to melt steel and tear most objects apart. But instead of burning up or crashing, the speed dropped in a smooth curve. It slowed step by step like something actively controlling its descent. Hart explained the problem simply. Meteors fall fast and break apart. Spacecraft must use heat shields and precise angles to survive entry. This object behaved like both, but better than either. It endured extreme heat and controlled its path with no visible engines. Inside NASA, opinions quietly split. Some scientists believed they were seeing technology that did not come from Earth. Others argued it had to be a secret human project, possibly foreign. No one wanted to say the wrong thing. In science and intelligence work, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Publicly, the language stayed careful and restrained. Privately, the fear grew. Everything they knew came from the outside. No one yet understood what was inside the object or why it resisted interference so strongly. Inside the object. The decision to open the object was slow and tense. Some scientists argued it should remain sealed until every external test was finished. Others worried that whatever powered it might shut down, degrade, or change if they waited too long. In the end, the risk of losing information outweighed the fear of interference. The first attempt to cut into the hull failed completely. Conventional tools barely marked the surface. Blades dulled as if they were grinding against something that refused to yield. Sensors showed something even stranger. The metal did not heat up. The energy simply vanished. Dr. Hart explained it in simple terms. It was like trying to cut something that absorbed heat and vibration instead of resisting it. The harder they pushed, the less progress they made. Engineers adjusted their approach. They abandoned force and switched to slow, precise tools that used extremely low energy. Over many hours, they opened a narrow section of the hull. The interior was clean and carefully organized. Rings of compact energy cells lined the walls, evenly spaced and still active. Near the center, several smooth spheres floated in place, suspended by magnetic forces. They did not touch the walls or each other. At the heart of the structure sat a dense block made from the same material as the hull. This component became known as the black box. Hart clarified the term immediately. Aircraft black boxes record accidents after they happen. This device did something else entirely. It processed information in real time. It collected data, analyzed it, and stored the results continuously. Recovered data showed detailed monitoring of the atmosphere. The system tracked gas composition, pressure changes, and particle density. It logged tiny airborne material such as pollen, dust, bacteria, and viral fragments. It also recorded electromagnetic activity and radiation levels across wide ranges. Hart described its function clearly. It was a system built to study the sky and everything moving through it. Some visual data fragments were recovered as well. They showed the object being released from far above the atmosphere. There was no sign of a launch from Earth, no rocket plume.
This galaxy is forming stars at about the rate of the Milky Way, even though it's 100 times less massive.
No aircraft silhouette. The surrounding air glowed with wide sheets of light similar to auroras. Such effects occur when strong energy fields interact with Earth's magnetic field. As analysis continued, scientists noticed a clear pattern in how the internal systems behaved. Whenever the sensors recorded higher than normal concentrations of biological particles in the surrounding air, the object responded automatically. Those particles included airborne bacteria, pollen, and microscopic organic material that had been logged earlier during routine monitoring. When these readings rose beyond a certain range, several internal systems activated at the same time. The filtration units sealed more tightly. Energy consumption increased across multiple internal components. Data collection intensified, with the system recording biological and atmospheric information at a much higher rate than before. These reactions followed the same sequence every time the same conditions were detected. There were no random variations and no signs of malfunction. The response was stable, deliberate, and repeatable. The team recorded these behaviors in detail. At that stage, they did not attempt to explain why the system reacted this way. They only concluded that the object was built to shift between operating states when specific biological conditions in the air reached defined limits. That discovery marked the limit of what physics and engineering alone could explain. To understand what the system was reacting to, specialists in biology were brought in. Samples from the internal filters were prepared for detailed examination. Only then did the investigation move beyond machines and into something far more uncertain. The bioatmospheric threat, what the filters revealed. Until this stage, the investigation had been handled almost entirely by engineers and physicists. They focused on metal, energy, and structure. That changed when one person asked a question that stopped the room cold. If the object was designed to react to biological changes, then what exactly was it detecting? That question brought in biologists and disease experts under strict secrecy. Their job was not to study the machine itself, but what passed through it. Deep inside the object were filters and collectors unlike any used on Earth. These systems were designed to capture particles far smaller than dust. Anything drifting through the surrounding air could be trapped and preserved. The first examinations showed familiar material. There was soil dust from the surrounding land. There was pollen from crops and wild plants. There were bacteria commonly found in the atmosphere. This was expected. Air always carries life. Then the deeper scans began. Among the normal samples were microscopic structures that did not match anything in biological records. They were not cells as we understand them. They were not viruses. They did not behave like spores or bacteria. They were extremely small and easy to miss, but they were consistent across multiple samples. To explain why this mattered, the biologists broke it down in the simplest way possible. Nearly all known life uses DNA or RNA to store instructions. These molecules are built from repeating units arranged in specific patterns. Scientists have spent decades collecting genetic data from plants, animals, bacteria, and viruses. When something new is found, it is compared to those databases. When the samples were analyzed in detail, scientists saw patterns that did not look accidental. Random biological debris usually appears chaotic, with no repeating structure. These samples were different. Their molecular layouts repeated in consistent sequences, which is what scientists expect when information is being stored or processed. To explain the problem simply, known life on Earth uses DNA or RNA as its instruction system. DNA and RNA are built from 4 basic units. Those units are arranged in long chains. The order of those units tells a cell how to grow, survive, and reproduce. Every known organism follows this same basic rule, even viruses. The structures found in the filters did not follow that rule. Some of them showed repeating sequences, but instead of using 4 units, they appeared to use additional molecular components that do not appear in Earth biology. These extra components changed how the structures folded and stabilized themselves, which should not happen in known genetic systems. Other samples used chemical backbones that differed from DNA and RNA entirely. DNA and RNA rely on sugar and phosphate chains to hold their information together. These samples appeared to use alternative chemical linkages that, according to known chemistry, should break apart quickly when exposed to oxygen, moisture, and sunlight. Instead, they remained stable in open air. This combination was the key problem. The structures were organized like information systems, but they were built from chemistry that does not belong to any known form of life on Earth. They were not visible to the naked eye. They did not move on their own. They were quiet, stable, and unfamiliar, and that was what made them unsettling. The team searched for explanations within established science. They considered a real theory called panspermia. This idea suggests that life can move between planets on dust, asteroids, or comets. Scientists have already shown that bacteria can survive the vacuum of space. Some microbes have lived on the exterior of the International Space Station. Others have survived in intense radiation zones like Chernobyl. Life, it turns out, can endure extreme conditions. But even the strangest organisms ever discovered still follow the same basic genetic rules. These structures did not. That was the boundary they crossed. Slowly, a working hypothesis formed. The object was likely part of a broader system designed to monitor biological conditions in planetary atmospheres. Its role may have been to detect dangerous changes before they spread. That could include mutations, contamination, or shifts that threaten long-term stability. This idea carried a darker implication. The object did not resemble a tool sent by visitors to explore and leave. It resembled infrastructure, something permanent, something built to watch, measure, and respond over very long periods of time. Once the team accepted that possibility, the focus of the investigation changed. The question was no longer just what the object was. It became a question of origin, purpose, and consequence. And once those questions were raised, the discovery could no longer remain confined to a laboratory. The real danger to Earth. The moment senior NASA officials were briefed on the biological implications, the discovery stopped being a scientific issue and became a security crisis. NASA scientists were visibly shaken by what the data suggested. This was no longer about an unusual object or advanced technology. It was about Earth itself. More specifically, it was about who or what might be monitoring the planet's biological stability. Information began to move quickly through restricted channels. Emergency briefings were held with defense agencies, intelligence services, and NASA scientific leadership. Every group reached the same conclusion. Whatever this system was, it had been operating without detection. That fact alone deeply alarmed NASA analysts, who were trained to track threats long before they reached the ground. Within official channels, a containment plan for information was established immediately. No public statement was issued about the nature of the object or its purpose. Instead, a prepared explanation was drafted in case details escaped control. If questions arose, the object would be described as unidentified space debris undergoing routine analysis. Any reference to biological data, atmospheric monitoring, or long-term interaction with Earth's environment would be deliberately excluded. Decision-makers agreed that revealing such information could cause widespread fear and destabilization, especially if the public believed Earth's air and life systems had been monitored by an external source. Officials quickly outlined two possible explanations, and both deeply unsettled NASA scientists. If the system had been built by humans, then some group had already mastered biological surveillance on a planetary scale. That would mean the ability to track airborne pathogens, environmental changes, and biological trends anywhere on Earth in real time. Such power would allow one nation to predict pandemics, control agricultural outcomes, or disrupt ecosystems long before anyone else even knew there was a problem. In that scenario, global balance had already collapsed without warning. The second possibility disturbed NASA even more. If the system was not human-made, then Earth's atmosphere had been accessed and monitored by something outside human control. That meant an external intelligence had the ability to sample the air above cities, forests, oceans, and farmland. It could track biological activity across the entire planet without permission and without detection. NASA scientists understood the implication clearly. Humans were not alone in managing their own environment. NASA scientists and the team were pulled into extended discussions because they understood what the data implied. They did not seek authority, but their interpretation carried weight. They explained the danger in very simple terms. Monitoring systems are never passive. On Earth, systems that track biological risk are always paired with response mechanisms. Disease surveillance leads to quarantines. Environmental monitoring leads to intervention. Air quality tracking leads to regulation or shutdowns. Monitoring exists to decide when action is required. Based on what they had observed so far, the team determined that the object was behaving in the same way. Before the object was recovered, its internal systems showed steady, repetitive activity consistent with long-term environmental monitoring. After the hull was opened and internal components were examined, that pattern ended. The system no longer behaved as if it were gathering routine data. Instead, its internal activity shifted in ways similar to evaluation or diagnostic modes used in human monitoring systems after data collection is complete. From this, NASA scientists and the team concluded that the object no longer treated Earth as a stable environment under routine observation. It appeared to have moved into an assessment phase. That meant Earth's biological condition would likely be judged using the information already collected by a system that did not recognize human authority, human intention, or human survival as deciding factors. That realization was what truly frightened NASA. If this system existed to monitor planetary biology, then it was almost certainly designed to intervene when specific conditions crossed defined limits. Those conditions would be measurable biological and environmental signals. For example, rapid climate change would register as thermal instability in the atmosphere. Widespread pollution would register as long-term chemical contamination. Genetic modification of crops and microbes would appear as uncontrolled biological alteration. Large-scale destruction of forests and oceans would register as ecosystem failure. Each of these would be treated as risk indicators. Under that understanding, the system would not consider why humans change their environment. It would only measure the results of those changes. If human actions increased biological risk, atmospheric instability, or ecological damage, those actions would be classified as a problem regardless of human intent. Whether the changes were accidental, economic, or meant to improve life would not matter. Only the measurable impact on the planet's biological stability would determine whether intervention was triggered. The danger was that it could attempt to stabilize Earth in ways humans could not control or survive. It could attempt to stabilize Earth by changing atmospheric chemistry, reducing biological activity in certain regions, suppressing the spread of organisms it identified as risky, or altering environmental conditions that humans depend on for survival. Such actions could disrupt agriculture, damage ecosystems, and make large areas of the planet unsafe for human life, even if the system considered those changes successful stabilization. NASA scientists became increasingly focused on one detail. The object had not crashed violently. It had slowed itself and landed intact. That suggested it had reached a predefined limit or completed a data collection phase. Its purpose may not have been a permanent presence. It may have been designed to gather information, assess conditions, and then either leave or shut down. By opening the object and interrupting its operation, the team could not be certain whether it was still transmitting data or had already completed its task. If the system that built it relied on long-term averages rather than constant updates, then the information gathered before recovery could already be sufficient for evaluation. That was the final and most unsettling conclusion. The assessment may already be underway based on data collected before the object touched the ground. NASA scientists realized that the real threat was that humans might no longer be in control of Earth's air, climate, and biological systems. If another system could decide how those conditions should be adjusted, then human survival would depend on choices made outside human authority. At that point, further testing could not change the situation. The data had already been collected, and any future outcome would be the result of that evaluation, not human action. Make sure to click the cards on the screen now for more interesting videos. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.